So we're diving into a really complex and frankly deeply personal story today. It was written by a man named Mark Edel, and it details his decades-long struggle, a struggle that involves his son's mother, and the government of Bucks County, Pennsylvania. And right off the bat, the title itself is a question. I have a story that may be of interest to you. You can feel that tone of, personal appeal, a bit of mystery. So our goal here is pretty simple. We're just going to walk through this story exactly as the author laid it out for us. To make sense of this really intricate account, we've broken it down into 6 parts. This should help us follow the author's perspective, and we're going to kick things off with his most central claim. So the author, Mark Edel, he starts with an incredibly serious allegation. He claims that back in 2007, he made a report to the Pennsylvania Child Abuse Hotline about his son's mother, and that report was completely covered up by officials in Bucks County.
Now, this story spans more than 20 years, and this timeline here, it's like a roadmap of the key moments he really hones in on. It all starts back in 2000 when he first met his son's mother, and then it moves to this key date he calls Ground Zero, and then on to all the critical events that just cascaded from there. Okay, so to really get a handle on his claims, you first have to understand how he describes the central figure in all this, a woman he calls Tess. He paints a picture of her as 2 completely different people, with this dramatic switch happening in June of 2003.
And this comparison is absolutely central to his whole story. I mean, he describes this incredibly stark, sudden transformation. One minute, she's the loving partner he's building a family with. The next, it's like a switch flips. He says it's as if a Mr. Hyde just magically appeared, and she became this antagonist operating on hatred and revenge, using their son as a pawn.
So you're probably asking, what could cause such a massive shift? Well, according to the author, he points to one very specific incident, way back in the beginning of their relationship. He holds this up as the very first red flag, a moment where he says he was essentially being told, don't trust what you see or hear or smell.
And yeah, it's an unusual anecdote. He describes a moment where she denies something, a fart to be specific, that he says 4 of his 5 senses absolutely confirmed happened. He presents this as the start of a pattern of her denying what he saw as just obvious, plain as day reality.
Right, so for him, this is the whole point. That seemingly small, almost comical event was the blueprint for everything to come. He's basically saying Tess showed me from the beginning she was a liar and that he shouldn't trust his own senses when he was with her. This, in his mind, set the stage for all their future conflicts. So how does he explain this alleged transformation? He actually puts forward a theory. He says he doesn't believe Tess was just born evil or anything like that. Instead, he argues that her actions are all rooted in her own unresolved trauma from childhood. And he lays it out in these 4 steps. Basically, his theory is, she was abused as a kid, then silenced by adults she trusted. This, he says, created a deep, festering need for revenge. And since she couldn't get that revenge on her actual abuser, she projected it all onto another man, onto him.
And this is where it gets really interesting. He connects this theory to her job. He says, an abused woman with a hidden agenda joins the Justice Department of Bucks County, Pennsylvania. A Trojan horse, if you will. He doesn't see her becoming a court reporter as a coincidence at all. He sees it as a calculated move, positioning herself inside the very system she would one day, he claims, turn against him.
All right, so this is the point in the story where his personal drama crashes right into the machinery of government, and it all centers on one specific county official. So, according to the author, right after he made that call to the abuse hotline, a county commissioner named Diane Ellis Marsegula showed up at his job, at a restaurant. He says she offered to help, but looking back, he's convinced it was all an act. He now believes she was there to size him up and personally interfere with the investigation to protect a fellow county employee, Tess. He frames this whole interaction as a massive conflict of interest. It's his prime example of the system just protecting its own. In his eyes, her actions created 2 different sets of rules, one for the public and a completely different one for people inside the county's judicial community. He couldn't get justice, he claims, because the person he was accusing was one of them. Well, as you can probably guess, he didn't let it go. But the author claims that the more he pushed his case, the more he tried to expose this alleged cover-up, the more the system itself turned on him. It went from ignoring him to actively targeting him.
And he lists the consequences he faced. He was arrested in 2021. He was incarcerated for 13 months, which even included time in a state mental hospital. He was put on probation and had to pay fines. And he presents all of this not as the result of his own choices, but as retaliation from the county. A coordinated effort, in his view, designed to shut him up for good. It is worth noting, though, that his record was eventually expunged in 2024.
I mean, he puts it bluntly. You're not supposed to shoot the messenger, like Bucks has done to me. That's exactly how he sees himself, as a whistleblower who is punished for trying to bring a problem to light, instead of being listened to.
So, where does this all end? Well, it doesn't. The story doesn't really have a resolution. Instead, it concludes with this kind of unresolved standoff, where the author makes a very direct, very explicit offer to Bucks County. He lays it all out like a business deal, right here in his writing. He's got demands, a motorhome and a lifelong income for himself, and a CT scan for his son. And in return, he makes an offer: his complete silence. He'll sign an NDA, hand over all his files and hard drives, his entire collection of evidence, and just make the whole thing go away.
So what are we left with? Is this a father's desperate fight for justice for his son, or is it a deeply personal vendetta, one fueled by the bitter breakdown of a relationship? The story he's written is this incredibly tangled web of personal history, shocking accusations, and claims of systemic corruption. And in the end, it really just leaves you, the reader, to sort through his version of events and grapple with these huge questions about truth, about trauma, and what justice really looks like.